This is the March 3rd meeting of the PEG Access Advisory Committee. I'm Carlin Reed. I'm the chair of the committee. And one thing I'm going to do right now is take a roll call for the members. This is being recorded for later playback and viewing. Vince Carlson, please say you're here, present, or something like that. Here. And Cynthia Rainey?
Rainey, present.
And Corey Atkins?
Here.
Great. All right, all members are present. I'll also note that we also have here Jason Bulger, our Chief Technology Officer for MMN, and Mark Pauley, also for MMN. And Sue Busky, our consultant, is joining us. And Nancy Pierce is gracious from the wilds of Carlisle. Appreciate that. As well as our select board member, Terry Ackerman, is also here as well. I think that's all that we have online. Okay, so we're ready to go. Thank you all for joining us. It feels strange. I'm looking at blank space here, but that's okay. I can pretend. I'll just hold a screen up there and look at it that way. We're going to be doing a couple of things today. Primarily, we're going to be looking at the MMN budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And that to me is the major focus of today's meeting. The Finance Committee does not review MMN's budget because it's an enterprise budget. We're the only group that does. The Financial Audit Advisory Committee receives an audit at a very high level from the town's auditor, but they only look at about 4 numbers. So any detailed examination of the studio's budget rests with this committee. That's why I'm glad that we had a look at a draft budget, and today we've looked at a revised budget that Jason has just handed out.
Sorry,
I think he's also emailed it to you as well. Just to give you that heads up. Okay. Now the base. Okay. The other thing we're going to be doing after looking at the budget, we're going to do a brief update on the Comcast franchise renewal. I have passed around here in a hard copy revised press releases and drafts. Sue, I haven't sent it to you yet. I want to have the committee take a look at it first. We can also talk about the April 3 launch prep date, the May 10-11 focus group dates, and the survey and whatever other updates we need to do for the franchise agreement. Then we're going to take a look at our next couple of meetings of April 6th, April 6th, May 4, June 1. And then we'll have, we did have some minutes that were sent to me just recently, but I don't have it on the agenda here, and I'm going to have to move that to the next meeting for that. So Vince, your minutes for the January and February will be transferred over to the next meeting for the date, which will be April 6th. Okay. All right. And then we have adjournment. So that's what we'll be looking at. Now, Jason, do you happen to have an electronic version of what you are about to hand out?
Yeah, I'm going to present it on Zoom.
Good. Let's go do that, because I'd like to turn this now over to you so that you can lead the MMN update, presumably with the budget and then with whatever else we need to discuss. So go ahead, Jason. Thank you.
Share my screen. I ask if they can see that, but I know that they can. All right. Well, thank you, Carlin. I'm happy to give a brief overview of the budget, where we are. I did send a more recent version that I got from Brandon. Carlin had asked a lot of really good questions about the budget, and I had been reviewing those questions with Brandon, and he realized that the version that I was working off of and that you had seen was older. The changes were not of any of the requests. They were only of the sort of incidental costs that we get cross-charged for HR, and also any like health insurance and updated numbers in terms of those benefit lines. And then also apparently there were some calculations that relied on outside other documents that the links had not finally come through in the document sent. But anyway, just to say that the changes were not like we retooled the budget. It was more just like there was some updated numbers that finance had, and they confirmed that some numbers had changed. And so they just wanted to cement that in place. The presentation, everybody's got a printed copy, just has a few slides that give some highlights. And I know that some of the slides, we're not really going to dive into every line of the budget. Just wanted to highlight some high level changes and what we were looking to do from this year from last year to this year. So this is a summary of the operations line items. Again, you all have the full document emailed to you, and then I have printed copies here. The takeaway here in terms of changes from last year, we did add a line for computer supplies. We tend to buy a lot of computer supplies throughout the year, and historically they've been purchased through capital. And these are things like adapters and cables and dongles and microphones that are not actual capital purchases. If they're part of a single upgrade or something, that's fine. But we found we just were buying all this stuff and it wasn't being traced. So we added that line item. We're actually reducing by the same amount our other professional technical services line. Carlin asked a good question of, what is that? It's basically our annual subscription licensing for the Teleview Hypercaster system, which is the ongoing maintenance and licenses we use for the broadcast equipment over at the studio that pushes out to the channels. We're anticipating replacing that equipment, so we may actually not need to spend anything because sometimes the licenses for the first year are included in the purchase and then it's subsequent years. And so we anticipate the ongoing licenses being about $23,000 to $27,000.
Stop right there. What you're talking about, though, I'm trying to take it to the line items. Is that line number 5849 for $57,000 for fiscal year 22? Or what do you?
I am, yes, sorry, just to be super clear, I'm talking about object code 5319, which is the other professional technical services line. It's in the yellow section.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
It's 23,000. So that amount has been reduced by about $4,000 from last year's request. And we also added an increase of $4,000. So those two essentially cancel each other out in terms of net change from year over year. But I'm also mentioning that line, because we are looking to replace the equipment, and oftentimes that one-time capital purchase includes the software support and licensing for the first year, we may not need to expend that money, but that's usually what that line is for. And then some of the other changes, small tools and office supplies, each increased by $500, a pretty negligible change. And there was one other line that went down by a few, equipment repairs went down by $700. Just to note that some of those insurance lines that are blank in this new version have been confirmed to be with the treasurer and with the finance office. So that money is not anticipated needing to be spent this year. And it really just depends on who is taking benefits from the group. If they're not taking the town's benefits, then we don't end up having to pay for them. So we try to budget. The town has a formula based on how many FTEs are within a group that they anticipate taking the insurance, but sometimes when it's a small group, we actually know how many are.
Let's hold on. Terry, you have a question? Go ahead, Terry.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So that was going to be one of my questions about the health insurance. So let's see, I have a couple other questions. So when the finance committee reviews enterprise funds at that public hearing, they don't go over this budget?
Oh, no, they do. They do.
They do.
The approximate time that they spend on the MN budget is about 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Will this be in the enterprise budget? Okay, so this is the presentation that we include in the enterprise area, in the enterprise budget.
We have a different slide format, but it's essentially I'm
Okay.
giving you guys more in depth than I would be going into there.
Okay.
I mean, the audience there is very broad in general. They want to see high level things. Here, you guys know the operations a little bit more, so I'm giving you a little bit more of the background. But yeah, we will pare it down for that conversation. But yeah, we will have an opportunity at is it the 15th or the 17th? 15th, yeah. So I'll be there.
Good.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that. That's great. I have two more questions. So the overall budget is up more than 100,000, and I see some of looks like salaries are up a lot. so you have maybe more staff than you did before, and also equipment and capital are up, and this is something you might be getting to later when we get to the franchise agreement, that we can try to get some offsets somehow from Comcast in future years. So I guess I'd like to hear on these two items, salaries and equipment and capital, why are they up and how are you paying for them? Thanks.
It is in the presentation. I'll get there.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thank you.
That's-
Vince had a question. Go ahead, Vince.
I just wanted to go back to that Telview again for a second. Is that what's called a Telview server? It's a new version of the Telview server?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I want to touch base with you and Mark later about something that apparently comes free with the Telview server, which is an app which runs on phones and tablets, and also on things like local TVs that makes it quite simple for people to use it. I think that's the main advantage. It's kind of an ease of use thing.
Okay. That sounds good.
So, but I'll pass on the information to you. I noticed that Bill Ricca TV, which is called EA TV, is using it. And they got a new Telview server apparently recently. And I think some of the elements of the app just came out. They had it on iPhones and iPads first. Now they've got it on Android. And Stu, I think you and I have discussed that briefly too. In Minneapolis, there's a collection of towns north of Minneapolis called North Metro TV. And I think you mentioned that you had done work or are doing work in another part of Minneapolis. I think it may be related to Edina. And they have a similar group. So what they do is they, even though they all have to make their own deals with Comcast and Charter, I think Charter is the other main competition there. They kind of combine forces to have what's essentially a common contract on the way that they operate their PEG operations. And like some of the towns are small, they've got 5,000 people. So they really can't afford much on their own. They'd be like Stowe, for instance. But because they can get together as a group, they have more flexibility in what they can afford to do, both for government meetings and also for educational and, the public meetings. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'll pass. And Sue, am I correct there in saying that there's parts of Minneapolis where you do business?
Yes, you are correct. I do a lot of projects for consortia of local governments who have a joint powers agreement with regard to cable franchising.
Okay, let's get back to the budget.
Yeah. And so as Terry pointed out, so this is focusing on operations, mainly those yellow and green object codes on this slide. I have separate slides that deal with personnel and capital. So I just had wanted to highlight those changes, specifically the ones that I went over already. Those were really the only changes from this year to last year in terms of the operations budget lines. And I've highlighted those three changes on this slide, which just explains that we did add some computer supplies. We reduced the other professional technical services. Again, that line, if we do make the capital purchase, will not need to be expended. And this is an enterprise fund. So if we don't expend, it's not like we're just going to buy something else. Like it goes back into the fund balance and we'll be, able to sort of offset some of the other expenses that we have.
Before we go to the next page, I have a question about fiscal year 22. The actuals. This is under operations. I just noticed there was a big drop in the operation between fiscal 22 budget and fiscal 23 budget. So what would do you remember what was going on then? Is it just personnel?
Well, you look at the top, those top line, it's a
Yeah.
delta,
So when you say
Right.
regular full-time,
So that's the difference.
a lot of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And the car allowance, I mean, there's a lot of things that are zeroed out. And I have a feeling that's related to
Yeah.
personnel.
And the other, then, let's see, that was, okay, that's it. Thanks. Go ahead.
Question on the
Sure.
interfund transfer. Is that your allocation of time to,
nope, so there is no allocation of my time. There are two interfund transfers, a personnel one, that's object code 5199, and that is for HR services for helping the department. There's another one all the way at the bottom that's $424. I asked Brandon about that and I sent you the response, but I can certainly follow up to the entire committee and explaining that $400, but it's a formula based on services that the town provides to their, but it's not me. There's nothing from my salary that comes in.
But it's good observation. That's all that this enterprise, that this program pays to the town for the services that the town provides. Because it's not a true enterprise fund, it's a special revenue account.
special revenue fund? Right.
That's the benefit. If we were not a special revenue account, that number would be substantially more. I don't know how much more.
Oh, wait a minute now.
Mhm.
Who is the enterprise fund? Light Plan?
No. The PEG access, the PEG fund
Oh.
is a special revenue account.
Yeah.
If it were not a special revenue account, but were a true enterprise fund, like the light plant, that inter-fund transfer would be substantially larger than $1,554, whatever it is.
I think Kate used to claim about 20% of the time.
I don't know what it'd be now.
Yeah, so right now, none of my time is incorporated in any of this.
Oh, okay, great. Can we get more of your time?
Talk to my wife.
Jason, one question on the 77K for the communications equipment.
Yep, so that's in the capital. Can we get to that? in the
Oh,
capital slide?
that's what I wasn't sure
Yeah,
about. Yeah, good, because that accounts for the delta.
So here's the personnel slide up on the screen. It's in the packet and also in here. So we've been carrying the education coordinator position for a little while and it has been vacant for a little while. We also had a station manager position. However, it was an MP1, which was lower than our production manager at the time, which meant that literally every staff member reported directly to, at the time, Aaron, the public information officer. And when that was shifted from the public information officer over to me and this technology department was envisioned by the town manager, it was with the goal of having a division manager responsible for MMN for the operations. And so this budget here proposes a station manager with the salary that you can see covered by the people in Zoom here. It's hidden. And proposes eliminating the education coordinator position, not because we actually anticipate getting rid of all of those duties, but because we're hoping to roll those into some of the producers and other positions jobs so that we can achieve those things. And we have been able to achieve some of those things, but we're going to take another look at that. But we hope that by adding a different role, we can have more day-to-day operation oversight. I'm at the studio every other week, maybe for a couple hours, and I Zoom with people, but I'm not there day-to-day. And so what we really would like is somebody to help be that point of contact and make decisions. Mark does this a lot of the time, and there are discussions that maybe some people would move around in roles, and that might also affect what we have to backfill, because if, for instance, hypothetically speaking, Mark were to move into that role, then maybe we don't need to fill his old role with the exact same personnel. It depends on the qualifications that the people bring to the table. So in my opinion, this is sort of a worst case scenario personnel wise. It might actually be a lot less than this, depending on what we need after we make some of those changes. We have talked about historically administrative scheduling, payroll, personnel issues, like those things were the needs that were identified when I took over the oversight of Minuteman Media. And so it might be a much smaller group of responsibilities that we'd be looking to fill instead of a production manager, if maybe the person in the station manager role has a lot of those skills and attributes.
I understand that the MP3 position has already been approved by the personnel board. That's already past that hurdle at this point. Is that right?
Well, so we're dealing with the new class and comp study. I'm not sure how many people are aware of the town's efforts, but it's quite a large undertaking. It hasn't been done since 2008. And so we have given HR the job description that we sort of envisioned for this new station manager, not the old station manager, because again, that was a much lower level, like coordinator position as opposed to an actual manager. That individual never managed the staff at MMN, ironically, even the title station manager. But yes, so in the new class and comp study, we have already put a proposal in for this because we were told this is supposed to last a while. If there's anything you have on your wish list, please put it in now so we can actually classify it so we don't have to go back after the fact. We have this new shiny thing and then, oh, by the way, let's cram something into it. So that is already there. In terms of, we did have a station manager position in the old classification and that's still on the books. But we would be looking to use the new classification schedule, and this is sort of the anticipated range of what we think that person would be making.
My concern was more that we were jumping to the personnel.
No, already done. Yep.
Good.
So when the personnel board votes, I think in a week or so to approve the new class and comp study, it will be done. And then town meeting will ratify it.
So how does this compare with, the equivalent salaries for other people in town that would be in the same classification?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the proposed class and comp study, it's actually on the website, it will be on the website as soon as the personnel board packet comes out. But there was a huge push to ensure internal equity for positions that were similar. And right now the town has several different compensation schedules that are all separate. We have a separate media one. Right now, the town is collapsing everything into two. One is the general town, and then the other is the light plant. So if you're not in the light plant, and it's not even all positions at the light plant, just specialized electrical related positions, then you're in this other schedule. So we've done a whole long list of interviews and questionnaires and analysis on every position, including this one, to make sure that it aligns with people who have similar responsibilities and backgrounds and requirements. So I feel pretty good about it. I know Mark and the group, we met and discussed the classification compensation plan this week, and everybody felt pretty good about it in that group. I know different people, different places might have had different reactions, but that group, they saw it very favorably. So I think that in terms of responsibilities, it's hard because any technical jobs, they are different than sometimes some of the other positions because of the level of detail that you need to have. But the new questionnaire that was used to calculate where everybody was going to fall did take into consideration a whole bucket just based on technical expertise, which I think helps move it into the appropriate bucket as opposed to just looking at maybe an equivalent position that doesn't have any technical requirements.
Well, how does it compare to salaries for equivalent positions, say with, one of the local TV channels?
Yeah, so as part of the class and comp study, GovHR was hired to actually do salary surveys. So we have that data in the plan. So you'll see we created benchmark communities that were either similar in size and budget, proximity. The town agreed that like these 20 communities are ones that we're trying to align our salaries with. And so you'll see that salary data in there. I don't have it right in front of me, but I can tell you it was definitely within the reasonable range of those other communities around us.
Okay, that's report that report is available.
Yeah, well, I don't think they posted on the website yet because the final considerations will be happening today, through the end of today. So I think early next week, they'll be publishing it for a public review, and then the personnel board will be having a meeting about it. I don't know if it's a public hearing or if it's just a regular personnel board meeting, but they will be taking it up at the meeting, and in their packet in the next week or so, it will be published so that people can see the proposed plan.
And right now in the warrant article book, warrant article number 6 has a list of the various schedules. And either Article 5 or Article 6 will be moved by the personnel board, depending on when the classification schedules are approved.
Does that study include unionized employees?
No, it's not bargaining unit employees.
Well, there's I forgot the name of the organization, and I don't know how active it is in Boston, but in New York, you can't operate in this business without belonging to, I don't think they call themselves a union. I think it's called a guild or something like that. And, I mean, there's great advantages to it. They've got their own retirement plan, they've got some health benefits. But I don't know if it's operative and awesome.
I will mention that the town is setting aside some sum of money to, and I think that was discussed at the hearing earlier this week, to try to address some of the discrepancies that come up as a result of the analysis of this plan. Minuteman Media is obviously different because we're not going to be getting the town sort of money if it impacts our people. We anticipate an impact on the lead producers, and that's yet to be seen because it hasn't been approved yet, but that might increase this amount a little bit. But we do have in-year salary reserves set aside. So in the budget that you're seeing, the final numbers, those do include some amount of money as salary reserves for things like promotions or changes or classification issues. And this year in particular was bumped up so that it could take into account some of those other issues. So this amount is what we anticipate. It's up on the screen. However, we know that things always come up. So the next slide I wanted to talk about specifically was capital. Mark and I and the producers, we sat down and had several discussions about ideas, needs, what they're hearing from the community in terms of ability to cover meetings, try to move this around, and create workable AV in places where we have meetings and just the broadcast equipment in general. And so we came up with this list, this plan. We had several meetings with the finance director and the budgeting team to discuss sort of the needs here. And so this is kind of our 5-year capital plan. Now, we are in the process of renegotiating the franchise agreement with Comcast. We do typically make requests for one-time equipment costs, and we do anticipate that a lot of this schedule will be covered by those requests and what Comcast gives us, if history has any bearing on this current round of contracts. We are trying to defer things if we can, to wait for that agreement to get it so that we don't have to dip into the fund balance where the capital normally comes from. But some things like the Telview system are badly in need of upgrade, and we don't want to wait another year and have a failure and then have to spend more money trying to get a temporary solution, et cetera. So we will be looking at the capital requests, especially for this year and the first half of next year, to see maybe there are pieces that we can defer. But the townhouse in particular, now that we've upgraded the Carlisle hardware and we see what is possible with actual quality cameras, switchers, equipment, that you can actually have HD productions that go on YouTube and people can see the nuances of the presentations or the people who are talking and understand instead of just a sea of garbled, blur. So we'd like to get this room and that room upgraded. And also we can't have 2 meetings simultaneously in this building. If one committee wanted to meet here and one in the hearing room, we can't do that today. So part of this is to address that, and also the assisted listening and the having people in the audiences be able to hear with additional speakers. These speakers, unfortunately, were not designed properly. They can't be used because they create a feedback loop. So anyway, we want to address all those things. Instead of having a huge request in fiscal 24, we'd kind of split it into 2 separate projects. But again, we will try to defer what we can to see what the agreement might yield, and so that we don't need to spend necessarily all these things. But we will definitely, for years 25 through 28, be looking for a lot of that equipment and more that Mark and I have been working on creating, again, reasonable things. They're not just like, oh, how about a helicopter? These are things that we are going to buy, are going to need in the next few years. I think Terry is right.
Terry, go ahead.
Sorry, I had to unmute. So I wanted to ask Sue for her reaction on these dollar amounts. Do they look like something that can be negotiated, too high or not high enough? What is your guess? I know we don't really know yet, but based on your experience.
This is actually the first I've actually seen these numbers. They look fairly reasonable to me. As far as the ability to negotiate funding from Comcast in order to cover these sorts of costs, they all certainly fall into the category of what would be considering equipment necessary for public education and government access. and the meeting coverage and so forth. So I think it all looks fine.
Do you think we should try to ask for more than this?
I would not at this point use these
Okay.
numbers as the ones we're going to be looking toward in the future. There is a lot more information to be gathered through the focus group meetings and our technical evaluation of the current operation. So these I see are for your budgeting purposes, but really are not intended to represent what you would be asking Comcast for.
Thank you.
Good question, Jerry. Thank you for doing that. Okay, go ahead.
And as Sue mentioned, we do have further analysis into the equipment we have, because this is like what needs to happen in order
Yeah.
just to barely maintain the equipment we have today. Mark, did you want to add anything to this particular topic, or did I cover everything?
No, I just think you're absolutely correct with what has happened in Carlisle. This is the first time that Carlisle is ahead of Concord, and I want to put that out there so everyone feels like, wait a minute, there's a competition. Their system has really gotten really much better since we did that. I also just wonder, with the complexity of what we really need to gut out in the townhouse, whether this is a little light. And I don't know, this is the place.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone should talk about it, I guess, freely, but I just feel like it's a little light.
I do too.
Yeah.
We probably did, I think it was closer to 50,000 in Carlisle in one room, had a lot more monitors and things, but I think that, you know, I'm just looking at it now, Jason, so I don't mean to surprise you on it, but it just seems a little light. And then the vehicles, you know, I realize that the money being spent out of this fund could really be used for anything, I believe. And I don't know that we really have a vehicle, but I really think the future of our remote traveling capabilities would include what Jason and I've already talked about, which would be a fully electric van that can house equipment and be able to not only do sports events, but also be able to go to certain buildings in town and just roll a single cable out into the building with a couple cameras, and we're live on the air. And that's not in here, but that's the other plan that Jason and I were talking about as what else we would want. So yeah, I don't know if we have an opportunity, Jason, to modify any of these numbers now, but
I mean, these are anything other than the fiscal 24 is completely open to renegotiation. This is just a plan so that people can see what's anticipated. But as you asked about the vehicle, you know, a vehicle was purchased, not by me, for MMN, and it is not really adequate for the operations of MMN.
yeah.
And so Mark and I have talked at length about a van that could be used to actually house equipment that we could use as a mobile studio and to do productions and with the 250th and all the other sporting events, as Mark mentioned. So there is some interest in the town to maybe purchase back that vehicle that was purchased for MMN that is not really used. So we would be able to get rid of that vehicle and then use some of those monies to, you know, use that money to pay for some of the new van that we'd like to get. So that would be the plan.
So I think what you said is the 32.
Hold on. I've got Vince first and then Mark. Vince,
Oh, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
I can't see anymore, so sorry.
Keep on going.
Yeah, Mark, he's deferring to you.
Oh, just quickly. So Jason, that 32, we couldn't change that right now in FY24?
No, we can. Whatever goes to town meeting is what is approved.
Okay.
We can, but we don't want to change it after the hearing, for sure.
Yeah.
Right, but we can also reappropriate things too within that
Okay.
amount.
All right.
If-
All right. I just wanted to, yeah, that's my
Yeah.
first time just seeing it. And I just wanted to voice my just my suggestion that it goes up a little bit more, because I think we've got a very challenging, if we decide to do the whichever room first, and I think this one might be the select board room, that that there is a lot of equipment that we're going to have to pull out of there and replace. So I think this number is going to be a little bit bigger. So
Yeah, well, these are the numbers that you gave that I also increased from what
Okay.
our estimate.
I was a
Um,
liar, but I'm lying now. I mean,
Yes,
And
exactly.
make sure you're ready for the FinCom at the enterprise hearing, because that's when it really matters.
Right, I know. But I think the reason why it's not higher than this is because Telview was a necessity. And when you get to Terry's first point was when you look at the fund balance and the total request, if we start looking like Beatty, then it's not going to be a very welcome hearing for MN. If we try to limit it to a certain amount, then I think that we can make the argument that these are one-time requests that maybe, every few years, there's a larger capital request, but then there are other years where there's a much smaller capital request. So the goal here is to try to balance, well, of course, we would like to gut all of this old equipment and do it right now, but we know that Comcast is going to be giving us lump sum payments
Okay.
for things just
Right.
like that.
all right,
And we also
cool.
have to balance the overall request that if this year our budget exceeds the last year's budget by $250,000, and people are going to say, well, you have 3 years left until you expend your fund balance. So we're just trying to
There's
weigh
a
those
balance
two
there.
things. But-
Terry, you've got your hand up. Go ahead, Terry.
Jason, I appreciate you, being sensitive to that, but I think I agree with Mark. I think we should, because of inflation and because of what it cost in Carlisle, and because we have the franchise agreement, I think we should really bump up these numbers a lot. And then you can put on the bottom, if you want, anticipated reimbursement from franchise and put the net so that FinCom does not object. And we're not going to look like Beatty because we have this revenue source. That's why I asked Sue Buskey, though. I don't want to go too high, but I'd rather start too high with Comcast and make us come down. I'd rather put in the total amount that we need for the townhouse and the vehicle. Just put the whole kitchen sink in and let them negotiate us down. That would be my preference.
Terry, there's something else I want you to know. The payment that we get from Comcast, there is a cost recovery component to it from the cable subscribers here in Concord. We're not taking that money just from Comcast's bottom line from their shareholders. It is, in a sense, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a sense advanced by Comcast and then paid over a 10-year period proportionally by the number of cable subscribers here in Comcast. So keep in mind, the money that you get from the capital up front comes from the Comcast subscribers from now to the end of the next 10 years.
Can I make a comment here?
If I'm wrong, tell me right now, because that's my impression of how this works. It's the franchise cost, which on my bill is about 85 cents a month. Go ahead, Sue.
I think it's really important to understand that the cable company is not obligated to show the line item on the bill by law. Okay. They're not obligated to take it from subscriber revenues. That's their choice. Okay. The PEG support is compensation for the use of the right of way. The law allows them, they are permitted to, but not required to pass it through at all. Okay. So there's a difference between showing a line item on the bill and their legal obligation. They buy new uniforms for their employees. They buy new equipment. They don't line item on that on the bill. They line item the stuff in the bill that goes to the community. Why? Because it kind of is part of a positioning to make, in some cases, when you're negotiating, the people who are asking for resources for something for the community to look like, oh, gee, we, the subscribers, are have to pay this when it's really the cable company. Okay, how the cable company gets the money to pay for it and their ability to line item on the bill are two separate things. So it's just something that most people, they don't think about it that way, but in reality, that is the way it is. They don't have to line item it. They don't have to pass it through to subscribers. In some places, we've negotiated situations and they were part of a larger negotiation where the company didn't pass any of it through because there were other issues involved in that negotiations and where they agreed not to do that. So it's just really important to be clear. Everybody just really understand that nuance because it is a nuance. There's no question.
It is, and I appreciate that. Let's go back to the capital, just make this general observation that for fiscal years 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, for that 5-year period of time, total amount of capital requested is about 232,500. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
More questions? On the, going back again to the Telview. Going back to the Telview server again, is that including working storage for basically, videos and projects that are in process, or is that archival storage?
Yeah, I mean, this proposed replacement was for the equipment that actually broadcasts and schedules content to the channels and does all sorts of other things like what you mentioned with apps and even has a capability for transcription services like those. That's the unit we're talking about. There are other pieces of equipment that we store files on and we edit with and we share things with. So this is more just the broadcast equipment itself.
Okay, well, there's also a lot of DVDs sitting around. I think, Mark, I don't know, you might want to comment on that, but I think there was a notion at one time to get those into online accessible.
Yes. The town archivist has a lot of them and has been going through them when he has time. So,
Okay, so where's that getting stored?
So we'll be pushing it out to the YouTube channel and making it available. So
You don't have an in-house server for that?
So we do. I mean, the Telview system has places to serve content from. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Come on.
How much storage? I don't. Well, the new one or the one we have today? I don't think we're running out yet. But Mark, do you know how much storage we have?
Well, it's slightly complicated. There's online storage that allows us to instantly play anything, and that's 70% full. I don't recall how many terabytes it is, but we always manage that number because things that aren't active, we then archive off to another server, which we have several dozen or more terabytes of offline storage. So it's a little complicated answer, but
Okay. Well, hard drives are pretty cheap these days, and like I'm upgrading my home server. I happen to be in Rebuff. I started back in the days when they were on tape, and they went on to DVDs, and they went on to files. So I haven't picked out exactly what I'm getting at, but it's going to end up being probably 20 terabytes.
Okay,
At
let's
least.
get back to the budget. Cynthia, you have a question?
So I want to get back to, do we want to increase the capital budget?
My recommendation
Yes, no, or
is that
maybe
this
so.
is the kind of thing that Jason and Mark would be talking about up until minutes before the enterprise hearing starts, and that what they actually approve at the enterprise hearing, present to the enterprise hearing is probably the number that's going to be going to town meeting.
Right. Well, I think let's get through this and maybe so we can look at it holistically because we haven't yet looked at the bottom line.
Okay.
And then we can talk about maybe the committee's recommendation because I think.
That sounds good. So hold that thought, remind them
Let's
before
keep
we
going.
end.
But I think to Sue's point, we are going to be doing another sort of analysis with all the equipment that will formulate or that will tie into the request to Comcast for the one-time, lump sum stuff. And that is separate from this, but I don't think it's a bad idea, to Terry's point, to list more of the things that we're already thinking. So we may change this, and depending on the recommendation, we may add more this year, or we may just add more for subsequent years. And we might also, I think Terry had a great idea, maybe list the last time we signed a franchise agreement, how much we got as the lump sum that went toward capital, so that if some people say, gosh, you're asking for $500,000 in capital, well, we got 250,000 in lump sum last time, so it's really only whatever, you know what I mean? Like, we could list that on there. I think Terry's suggestion was to sort of say, so that people don't get concerned if the number
Gives
was
them a framework.
right. This was just some examples of the pictures. So we talked about the Hypercaster, we talked about the townhouse. The other one was editing computers that are used by students, by staff to for teaching, for actually production purposes, to edit the content that is eventually ends up on the channels and on the internet. Here's revenue. You can see that in fiscal 24, the estimated Comcast franchise fee was 310. I do think that's low. We just got a payment in this week. And if that payment is an indicator, we would get 328,000 for fiscal 24. As you know, and as you'll see by the chart that's in the budget, it does fluctuate. The general trend is down, but it does seem to go up. Some quarters it'll jump and then drop down, and but if we use the last check and the last few as an indicator, this is definitely a conservative estimate. We expect it'll be closer to 320 or 330, unless something drastic happens in terms of subscriber information.
I'm not surprised about the Carlisle fee. It used to be much higher.
Right. Well, I did some digging into that because there's a $70,000 number there.
Yeah.
That was budgeted, but I didn't see the actual revenue on that. Like, I think we did get it 1 year, but then the next year was budgeted, but then the actuals dropped down to the 20,000. And we don't have the actual 23 numbers yet. I know that there's different components to what we charge them. And I know that part of it's the actual hours that we cover meetings, and then part of it's a usage fee for their residents who can use the equipment and facilities. So I will get more background in case there's a question, or I could address it at the hearing as to that. Part of this was done by the town's budget analyst who was looking at the data that he had. But and to your other question as to the fiscal 22, why does it say unaudited still? The auditors were on site this week. And so we anticipate getting the fiscal 22 audit numbers, the conclusion very soon, and that will go to the audit committee. But there have been delays. I think part of it was the town's financial software overhaul has taken staff resources away from normally auditing. There's been some other things that came up with the auditors, and then the pandemic and all the other stuff. So that will be done soon, and then we'll be able to change that column and update it if there are any changes, and also say that it's no longer unaudited, it's confirmed. And then the fiscal 23 audit should be, and closing the book should happen much sooner this year, because our transition to the new system will be in April, and hopefully that will be enough time for them to close the books in enough time.
Okay, I'm glad to stop you. Just Corey, you've got something, and then Terry has a question. Corey, go first.
I have a simple question, and somehow I missed this in all of this. I was under the impression that this was a self-funding entity from the subscription money. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah,
We're not BD, we're not anybody. We self-fund, and it looks like I
Right.
understood that we had plenty of money, like $1.5 million.
I agree.
Yeah, the fund balance is 1.5 million now, projected to be 1.4 million
Right.
in this budget.
Okay, so my impressions are correct.
Yep.
All right, so we should be putting in what you're actually going to need.
Yeah.
Because I find if money's just laying around, lots of people have other uses for it, and we want to
Right.
make sure that it's used for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my goal.
So it's an actual legal requirement. That the
Okay.
funds can only be used for cable TV and rate funds purposes, nothing else.
Okay.
So we're good with that. Okay, just gonna let me get for Terry next, and then Vince. Okay, Terry, go ahead.
Okay, so 3 quick things. So I agree with Corey. And if Comcast sees that we have $1.5 million sitting around,
Yeah.
that'd be trouble. Secondly, there's no payment in lieu of franchise predicted. I want to hear what happened with that. And finally, about the Carlisle fee. I think it looks much too low, because I've heard Mark explained times how many hours he spent over there. And he just said a few minutes ago, he spent $50,000 on capital installing it. So that 20,000 just really looks much, much, much too low for both years.
So yeah, I was going to say, can I reply? So I think they dropped off. So as COVID happened, we barely saw them in this last 2-year time frame. So I don't think using 2021, 22, whatever, as an example is really valid. I'm trying to ramp them back up again to go back to pre-COVID time, so that number's going to go up. And what Jason just said, it was their franchise fee that they spent, not ours. But I've been over there a lot, so it is going to change this year. It's going to get back up to.
So we build up for the actual hours that our personnel are working in there.
Yeah. And when we don't show up, because they don't ask us to because of COVID, they're not paying us.
You don't have in this presentation, hold on, Terry. You don't have in this presentation, which has been done previous years, the number of hours that have been dedicated towards Carlisle. That might be useful. It's not critical, but if it's easy to get to, I think in case the question comes up at the enterprise here. Go ahead, Terry.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If we have the actual hours that were billed, I think we should use that to come up with our 23 and 24 numbers.
Right.
I think it'll come up much, much higher than 20,000.
Okay. We're ready to talk about the payment in lieu of franchise?
Yes.
Take it away.
So the payment in lieu of franchise was removed at the town manager's request. This has been a long topic of debate. It was the first thing that I knew about when related to PEG was, people concerned on either side that this was either preserved or this go away. The concerns are that, how is the amount calculated? Is it truly reflective of the services that people who have broadband service get? Is it a legal mechanism to transfer between one enterprise and one special revenue fund? There's also the fund balance. Broadband has a $400,000 fund balance with a $2-point-something million operation, and PEG has a $1.4 million fund balance with a $500,000 operation. So for all of those reasons, initially we said, can we just come up with a new formula, have sort of like a session where we say, okay, let's see if we can calculate the direct impact of the number of Comcast subscribers who are also broadband subscribers, the number of people who are just broadband subscribers, the actual impact calculated on a per subscriber basis. Part of the problem is that the current formula was a percentage of revenue that broadband gets. And broadband gets revenue from all sorts of things, including other enterprises that they do work for, and dark fiber leases and things that have no impact on utilizing PEG services. And I think the motivation for that was to capture the revenue loss from broadband subscribers that no longer were Comcast subscribers. We also know that a number of the broadband subscribers are still Comcast subscribers and don't peel away from the amount that the franchise agreement gives. So I think for all of those reasons, it became a constant battle for a lot of people to both justify it and justify the calculation of it. And it was just decided that it not continue, and that's what the town manager did for this budget. I'd be very curious to hear from Sue if she knows of other communities that use a PLOF, or if she is even familiar with that.
I'm actually not familiar with it. I'd have to have a better understanding of what you're exactly what you're to.
The town has a broadband operation where we provide internet service to customers. And 2 years ago, it was proposed that the broadband enterprise, who may peel away subscribers from Comcast, pay PEG money for that loss of potential revenue. And a formula was created to capture some percentage of gross revenue for broadband. And that's what the PLOF, payment in lieu of franchise, is. Anyway, so you've not heard of that, Sue?
I've actually not heard of it, and I'd have to, there's some things about the concept that I'd like to understand a little bit better, because there's technically, I mean, if you look at what Comcast, the revenue that goes to the city as part of the franchise fee, it's not broadband. Okay.
Right.
And so the fact that the cities, that people do cord cutting, they leave
Right.
Comcast, okay, and they go over and get all their video services online. I see the concept. Okay, that's a revenue that the cable part that would have been part of what Comcast franchise fee is no longer there, and it's moved over to this online service. Actually, I think that there's some connectivity between that and this bill that's been trying to be passed as Massachusetts legislature for the last 2 years, that would cause streaming services to pay the equivalent of franchise.
Yeah. I think it is somewhat related. Well, let the record reflect, I am not pleased because I don't like losing $20,000 on my budget without having something to replace it.
I did want to address that the town manager indicated support that the town would be willing to pay for some money for the services that the government itself gets for the G part of PEG. If there are concerns about the long-term viability of PEG, not having enough revenue, that, I think it's been proposed by many people, including those people who don't support the PLOF, that this is a town-wide benefit. Whether you have Comcast or you have broadband, people can benefit from the services that PEG gets. And so the entire town should contribute a little bit of money for the direct services that they get. I think that in terms of the number of meetings, in terms of person hours required to cover those meetings, those costs can be more tangibly calculated than the number of subscribers who actually cut the cord. Because as I mentioned, we have many subscribers of broadband. When we go in their home, we see Comcast equipment and they still pay for Comcast. Now, some people do cut the cord and end up not being subscribers and don't pay into that. So,
All right, well, the town manager is in charge of the broadband organization. The town manager is also in charge of the TV station, so I will accede to what the town manager wants to do. But my reluctance and my regret is duly noted.
understood.
All right. Okay, what you would.
I have a question for Sue. Sue, I don't know if it's come up in our previous discussions with you before, but that $1.5 billion kitty that people keep talking about is there from the previous management of MMN. And basically that organization, which is called CCTV, basically wasn't spending. And, the equipment was getting older. But what happens if Comcast finds out about that? It's kind of like a reverse audit of the type that you do. This is something that Comcast is saying, you have all this money around, you're not spending it. Why should we give you more capital? Is that
I've heard
possible?
this before. Yeah.
They certainly can say that, yes.
Do
And
they do that?
I'll leave my comments at that. Okay.
Do they have a history of saying things like that?
Absolutely, yes.
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 So we ought to be spending this dough.
Or be ready to address it as part of the negotiations.
Exactly.
So on this slide, when you look at the overall revenue that we've gotten over time and the sort of the decreasing trend of those payments, I think that I totally agree. I would love to spend more of the money if we can renovate these systems now without having a concern about the long-term viability of PEG. I think, when you look at the projected numbers, we determined $150,000 dip in the fund balance this year, which is 10%, of the fund balance. And again, the other thing is, well, let's say we spend $200,000 in capital this year. Comcast is going to know that everything is a public record. Well, you want to hurry up and spend a bunch of money, and you just bought brand new equipment, so you don't need it now. We can't really make the argument. Now we can make the argument, and Mark has brought this up before, that the studio that we're at might not be adequate long term. They might use that as a location for the school to have interaction and training and whatever, but maybe we need a different building and a different infrastructure for personnel to work because the public can't go there during the day when the school's in session.
Yep.
Spending the money is not the only option, you know. As a matter of fact, Clark Booth and David Allen have always argued very strongly to keep that reserve for basically rainy day situations. If there is a recession, which could last for a long time, then, you know, in order to kind of keep an even keel on things, it's good to have kitty somewhere to draw from.
Corey, you had a question? You going to say something?
No,
Corey?
no,
Okay.
no.
Could I say something? Could I ask you a question? I can't see.
I was just agreeing that, that we should consider, having a separate facility where the public can go have access during the day.
I
Absolutely.
agree. Could I also mention something too? Just, and I think Sue could correct me, I guess. This is what Comcast is doing, is continuing a lease agreement for access to the town's poles and things. That's all they're ultimately doing, is where the town, Concord, is saying the lease for this is X amount of money based on the amount of people that are on it. It's almost irrelevant where we're using the money theoretically. It's just, do they want to stay on our poles or not? They could say, oh, we're pulling out. We don't want to be in Concord anymore. But it's simply a lease agreement for access to the poles, and then they give it to us over a period of time for 10 years. And does that, you know what I'm saying? So they're like, yeah, I don't care what you do with it.
I mean, that is a very correct statement. They can also make a lot of statements at negotiations about how when you use or don't use the money. So that I just put that out there as in the context of the overall conversation we're having. I also want to underline something I think Jason just mentioned, and that I've mentioned this to Mark. I am very concerned that the public cannot go into that facility. It's just a problem. I mean, from the get-go, the concept of PE&G access is the community should have access to the resources at the facilities. If they can't all have those resources available, it's like if the library shut its doors and said, you only can come in, you know, when there's no children here or whatever. That is an issue that I know I will be bringing up. I'm already observed it as a concern I have. As we look to what the future community cable related needs and interests are pursuant to the franchise renewal process.
Well, it isn't a universal policy, you know, in terms of using the school. I think, Colin, you had mentioned that, but Chelmsford uses their high school.
Their main base station is in the middle school.
Yeah.
Their satellites in the high school. Let's keep focused on the budget. We'll talk
That's a big
about
topic.
this next. Because I want to get back to your big question about should we suggest that the capital amount be increased?
To the end of the
Yeah, so I think that was the last slide. I was going to briefly mention the other revenue, and that the 250th might have some impact, depending on what they decide to film or do for marketing. There might be some other revenues there that, and a small amount are captured in this budget, but that is a variable that we don't know about yet. And then just to tie to Vince's comment, having a healthy fund balance, I think, is important, especially for the employees who either are working there or are considering working there. If they see that one bad financial year could mean the end of their position, they're going to be very hesitant to work there. But that doesn't mean it necessarily needs to be 1.4 million. I agree. I feel like it's a healthy balance. But so in other words, we don't want it to be $100,000, but you know, yeah.
What would you think would be appropriate? How many years should we sock away?
So the town does have guidance on that. I don't have it right in front of me, but like in general, there is, John Harris gave that to me because I specifically asked.
2 to 3 months.
Yeah, at a minimum, right? But there's a percentage of the annual budget that they recommend having. So, I mean, I think I would feel comfortable with no less than, you know, a year, you know, as a very minimum. But
You can see what the other enterprise budgets are required to do.
yeah,
See how that feels.
right.
That question may come up. at the FinCom here.
Well, Carl, I have a question for you. It's kind of a question for Department of, Telecommunications and Cable. And, since they kind of live by the FCC's book, although they have, some, I guess call it discretion to moderate the political ups and downs of Washington. Don't they basically tend to treat all ISPs equally?
Why are we talking about ISPs?
Yeah.
Well, again, it's the use of
Be careful about what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
We're looking at the budget for the cable, not for broadband.
Right.
Yes. And the time now is 4:45. We have 15 minutes left, unless we want to go extend. We really want to get into this discussion now, and I'd like to move it to another time if you want.
okay.
And you and I-
Stu, maybe describe what the franchise fee is for.
The franchise fee is the franchise fee is essentially the rent for the use of the right of way, and it comes from the revenue generated for the use of the right of way for cable services, directly and indirectly, i.e. advertising revenue, etc. So that's the source of the franchise fee.
The franchise fee, though, does not need to be dedicated to PEG operations at all.
As I understand it, in administrative law in the state of Massachusetts, the franchise fee has to be used for paid or cable-related purposes. Yes.
Yes.
There was a decision that came out. Carlin may be more familiar with this than I, but it's got to go back at least 20 to 25 years ago. That was an administrative law hearing. Judge issued an opinion with regard to the use of the franchise fees in Massachusetts.
Is that the city of Medford case?
I think that may be the one. I don't recall the specific city or town involved, but
Yeah.
that's been the practice and the administrative law for many years.
Yeah, that's,
I understand there's 44 PEG operations in Massachusetts. Is that?
Oh,
you
there's
know that?
many more than 44 PEG operations in Massachusetts.
I think that's drawn from the annual report of the
I
Department
can tell you, there's a activated access channels in many cities, many more than 44 communities in Massachusetts.
okay, let's wind this up. I think Cynthia, I've thought about your idea that we should be encouraging the studio to increase its capital budget. Allow for what is reasonable for this year. I don't know what that dollar amount is. Do I need to specify anything?
Well, I mean,
Here's the plan. After this budget discussion concludes, I'm going to ask for a vote from the committee members. Should we support the budget for the studio as presented, that will be presented at the enterprise hearing? But we're doing that knowing that that particular number might change. I'm okay with that, but I don't know if the other committee members are okay with that.
So change dramatically, yes.
Okay, well,
yeah, so if you
I
guys
would
can give
expect-
guidance, right, like, so right now at 84,000 with next year's request at 43,000, hypothetically speaking, if that were collapsed into the same year, is that the level that you're thinking, or maybe
So
even?
that would include.
let's go back, let's get the actual numbers. Let me look at your chart says.
So that would include step 2.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And the portable PA.
Or,
So you're saying collapsing the fiscal year 24 plus 25 together in 1 year?
Right.
Moving it from 84,000 to 137,500?
Mark, is that enough?
Well, I just sent a quick text to Jason to try to sneak a question in without publicly asking the question, but I don't know if he's seen it yet. So we do have the situation of other places in town that need to be upgraded.
Yes.
And
Like, for instance,
for instance, the rest of the school committee room.
and how much is that?
Should I disclose that on the call? Is that
15,000?
Not.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would
Fif-
provide what additional capability?
It would replace the cameras that are in there.
Yeah, the cameras are failing and the units that control them are failing. And once I believe we do that, the Minuteman media is part of that room, including the computer that needs to be replaced by the school, but would be okay. The rest of the room is something that the AV is failing. And I don't know how deep, how wide you want to go and replacing, monitors on walls and projections and all that stuff. But
That
that's
would be an 80-20 split between 20-80 split, right?
No, the school said that they're not paying for any more.
Whoa. The school committee said that, or
No, the
the?
superintendent said that.
Well, I think we need to, so let's do this.
I'm okay with lumping fiscal year 24-25 together and putting it both in 24. If you think that's appropriate, Cynthia.
So Mark, would you say that the portable PA system or finishing the Ripley work would be a higher priority for you?
finishing Ripley.
Okay, so let's leave portable PA and 20, to have something in 25, something to do.
Well, we would still.
I know, I'm just kidding. And then,
And then another 15.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is increasing the fiscal year 24 capital from 84,000 to 84 plus 43.5 plus 15, is that right?
Well, not 43.5, because she said leave the PA, so just 36, so 84,
So just
36.
that's 15,
Plus 15, all right, math. No. it's
51.
135?
right?
I guess 135.
51 plus 84, is 135. I'm gonna go with 35.
Okay, it goes up to 135,135, comma 000.
And it's not an unprecedented expenditure, so if you look back
Right,
historically,
yeah, it's not completely out of line. I
especially
think-
with inflation.
Right.
Okay, Corey, you've got your hand up. Go ahead, Corey.
I'm just concerned because, with the school committee, with Mark's assessment of the equipment at the school committee, given that the schools are the largest chunk of our budget and of the most concern to a lot of citizens, that we prioritize that, those expenditures and make sure that, that we're state of the art, so that citizens can watch that process and become more familiar with the totally unexpected expenses through mental health and everything else that our schools are experiencing at this time.
Are you ready for school committee?
I'm sure the school committee always appreciates that support. Thank you very
Yes.
much, Corey. I appreciate that. Okay, do you want to take a vote on this? How do you want to proceed as far as authorizing them to, or encouraging?
I think you could certainly just say you vote to support the budget as presented with the modification of adding, what we just said, 51.
We can't make the budget. We
Right,
can
right, no,
encourage
exactly,
the
right.
town manager to
Right.
increase the capital
Right.
level to $135,000 for fiscal year 24. How's that?
Yeah, we
Okay.
support it.
Is there
I don't think
anything
it's
else?
any concrete, right?
I have one more question on the assisted living hearing devices. What budget is that coming out of?
Facilities has money in their budget for
I
that.
think they had 70,000.
Mark's got his hand
It's
waving.
got some. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying bye to Sue. Sorry.
Me too.
Bye, Sue. Thanks. Okay.
We've been working with Ryan Orr and his team to purchase that equipment, so it won't be coming from here. Because it is more building related and it's for the people in the building, not for the broadcast.
Yeah, that's what I assumed actually.
Okay. 5 to 5, let's take a vote. Here, can I have a motion to recommend affirmative action on the, how do I want to say it? No, this is to support the studio's capital budget that will be presented at the Finance Committee's enterprise hearing. And to encourage the town manager to increase the fiscal year 24 capital budget to $135,000.
Second.
You have the motion.
Can I have that as a motion?
Oh, so moved.
Can I have a second?
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on this, Corey?
I think I've said what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, Corey. All right, then let's do a roll call vote. Carlin votes yes. Cynthia,
Yes.
Vince,
Yes.
and Corey?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, all right, then we passed the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you all very much for the budget presentation. I think that's it for the budget presentation.
And Jason, just when you put it in there, would this be like phase 2 of Ripley or something like that, so people understand?
Yeah, we'll
We're completing
clarify.
work that.
Right. I think to Mark's point, it was really difficult to know what was good and what wasn't good until we started replacing things. And
No, I
so-
understand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
but we'll make
I
it
mean,
clear.
you still might find a few little, things, but
Right.
I agree with Corey. It's important that little device is okay,
Right.
but it's not sufficient to really capture a sophisticated discussion with a lot of people in the room, citizen comment,
Right.
and which is important for the public to see. Is with a department of the town and a regional high school that use more than 50% of the town budget.
Okay, that concludes, do you have anything else for the MMA update besides that?
Well, talk for hours, but in the interest of time, we'll narrow it to that.
We'll do
I
another.
don't want to go into Saturday. It's gonna start snowing.
What I'd like to do is touch briefly
Yeah.
on the Comcast franchise renewal update, that's part of our agenda. Now, I had given you a packet of a couple of things, but really the critical piece or the interesting piece is to let you know where we are on the timeline, just a quick renewal on that. And we have confirmed the focus groups to be May 10 and 11 at the clock tower room for the Harvey Wheeler, here in the select board room, and also at the library in the Goodwin Forum. So I've confirmed those reservations. With that, I've drafted up drafts of 2 draft press releases, and I'm going to talk to Donna McIntosh about those because she was going to help me turn those into announcements. One for the Zoom portion of it, which covers just the 2 that we've tentatively scheduled for May 17th and 31st, and the other for the 3 in-person focus groups meetings that we've announced on that. So I'll work with Donna on getting that done. Does the committee have any questions about those?
I would like you to work with them.
Okay.
So she's our professional, even though these are very professional already.
Good. A target release date for these announcements, again, is going to be April 3rd. So it'll be this month. I'll be working with her on that, trying to get something sent out so that we get an announcement of these items. Okay, let's see. The other thing I want to touch on, next meeting, April 6th, calendar time. Now, we
April
do
6th looks good.
April 6th. What is April 6th?
Thursday.
April 6th is a Thursday at 3:30 here in the select board room. Corey, are you still there? Are you still there? You're still there.
She just left.
She's just left. No, she's gone. Okay. Any concerns, Vince, with April 6th?
Oh, it's good.
Okay. And the meeting after that would be May 4th. That is also a Thursday. 3:30 to 5 here. April 6th. At 3. And then May. And then May 4th. That's a Thursday here in the select board room at 3.
So these are all the first Thursdays.
Yeah. And the last one would be, now I've got June 1 for the next one. And that would be the time for our PEG Access Awards. That was the vision I had, is whatever we do with that. We'll work on the details on that at the May meeting. We'll touch on it on the April 6th meeting as well.
What's the town meeting date again? Is it,
April 30th, town meeting.
which is a Sunday? Right?
Monday,
That's the start of
first and
the
second. Now, unless something changes, we will be meeting in person, all of us,
Yes, sounds good.
for the April 6th meeting. Now, will we also still have a Zoom component?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard there's some bills kicking around. We're unsure yet if it will.
Regardless of legislation,
Yeah, of course.
because I'd like that offer, so it's someone else like.
What's
Mark
it in
or-
March 30th?
March 31st. I'd like to have it available so that we could still have it.
And like what happened today, Corey still could have been remote and that would have been fine.
That's right, because we have one person remote as long as we've got the chair and forum present.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so let's
Hopefully something will happen.
let's continue with this.
Well, the original version of that bill actually kind of strengthened the meeting law in certain ways because the meetings don't have to be streamed, but there does have to be public comment available. And actually that was not required under the old open meeting law. You know, the chairs had the option of ignoring public basically. So
That's correct.
There are good things to do, which brings us to the liaisons and public comment. Good timing. Do you have any other comments, Jason? Cynthia, do you have any other comments?
No.
All right. Nancy Pierce, do you have any public comments? And Terry Ackerman, do you have any?
No, it was very interesting.
Okay.
Nothing, but I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy, for joining us. Terry, what about you?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Then, since we're at the end of the meeting, it's adjourned. Thank you all very much for coming. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.